32 teams in 32 days. This is episode 30, the Los Angeles Rams episode. Let's welcome in Eric Williams, Rams and Lakers reporter for Sports Illustrated. Eric, what's going on?
Hey, Jake. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Happy to have you in. So let's get right into the goods. Rams football, the LA fans, they want to go to another Super Bowl. Here comes the quarterback upgrade, right? Maybe the only position on the roster that got underwhelming production last year. So in comes in Matt Stafford. We'll talk about Goff in a second, but a decade-long veteran in Stafford. Why did the Rams choose him, and why was this so necessary?
Well, I think there's a couple of reasons they went out and got Matthew Stafford. Certainly, when you look at Stafford and just the physical skill set, I think he's an upgrade from Jared Goff. He has a stronger arm. He throws with anticipation. He's a better athlete than Jared, so he gives some of the movement skills that Sean McVay was looking for in this offense. Ability to scramble, make second read throws. And then I just think overall they feel like he's a gamer in late game situations, that he's a guy that he can put the team on his back, lead them in a late scoring drive to win a game. So I just think overall they like the skill set. And Sean McVay kind of wants to see, what his offense looks like if they have a top 10 talented quarterback in the NFL. Jared Goff certainly was serviceable, but more kind of a game manager, I think. When you look at Jared's skill set to Matthew Stafford. Matthew's older, he's 33 years old, and he really hasn't won in the league. I know he's been in Detroit, and you can look at the pieces around him and maybe blame that for the fact that he doesn't have a playoff win in his resume. But certainly there's going to be some pressure on Stafford now to kind of lead this team, to a Super Bowl.
Right. So they bring in kind of valuing, Goff and Stafford are similar in terms of arm strength. Both of them one of the best deep ball throwers, or they're both two of the best deep ball throwers in the entire league. So Goff goes to Detroit, but Stafford comes in, like you said, no playoff wins. Part of that due to being in Detroit. So Goff goes there, but Goff won a couple playoff games. I mean, he won one with a broken thumb last year, went to a Super Bowl behind a very solid supporting cast. Now Stafford has that. How much pressure is on him to kind of, okay, we had the same supporting cast that Jared Goff had when he was 24, 25 years old. He went to a Super Bowl. I've been in the league for 10 years now. How can I not win with this team around me?
I think there's an immense amount of pressure on Stafford, and he seems to be embracing it when we talk to him. He understands the situation. He's going to one of the biggest markets in the United States. The Rams are trying to continue to get their footing in Los Angeles. You're talking about the Lakers and the Dodgers, teams that have won multiple championships. And certainly Stafford's going to have a lot of pressure on him to go out and not only do what Jared did, but to do better than that, to win a Super Bowl, not only get there, but to win. So a lot of pressure on Stafford, a lot of pressure on Sean McVay, because he's the person that ultimately pulled the trigger on this deal to move Jared Goff to Detroit and give up all those picks. I mean, they haven't had a first round pick in 3 or 4 years. So I think really pressure on Stafford and pressure on McVay because he's the person that initiated the deal.
Yeah, so McVay, real quick, I've always thought it was funny because they missed the playoffs in 2019 and everyone was like, okay, what's going on here? Then they have a great year last year, suffer, obviously Goff gets injured, and then the whole quarterback situation goes to a mess. But Sean McVay's sitting here, he's won over 60-something% of his games, and I'm like, people are forgetting about him as one of the top, or one of the premier head coaches in football, and I'm like, I don't know if there's a better guy in the league to run this team right now than him.
I think that's fair. I think he does get overlooked a little bit because of the hiccup he had the season before where they didn't make the playoffs after such an impressive run to the Super Bowl. But you're right. I mean, he engineered this team to get to the playoffs, even though they had some injuries and Jared Goff wasn't playing at his best. And so, yeah, I've been very impressed. This is my first season, going into my second season covering the Rams, covered the Chargers and Seahawks before that. Very, very impressed with his control on a day-by-day basis, getting this team ready to play each and every week. And I certainly think that's the strength of this team, having a guy like Sean McVay lead them.
So talking to the coaches, in some interviews, what do you think took them over the top in wanting to move on from Jared Goff? Was it the decline since the Super Bowl performance, or was it, some of these injuries, just him not being available to play some of the time?
I think it was the turnovers. I think the first time when McVay called Goff out publicly, it was after, I believe it was a San Francisco game where he turned it over 2 or 3 times. I think he just got tired of, in those situations, he just wanted Jared Goff to play clean football. If they played clean football, they had a chance to win each and every game, particularly, with the way the defense was playing last year. Against San Francisco twice, against Miami. Jets didn't play well, and the Jets didn't have a win in that game. If he just plays reasonably well, they win that game. I just think he wanted somebody that could not only give them more explosive plays, which Stafford can do that, but also somebody that could take care of the football better. And if you look at Stafford's record over the years, I think he has just 8 interceptions a year. And so that's something that, if you look at his past, Stafford does a better job than Goff.
So this is something I've talked a lot with some of the guests that have come on this show. The last quarterback not named Tom Brady or Peyton Manning to lose a Super Bowl and return to one at any point was Kurt Warner, who did it 9 years apart with a different team. Going back further, the last quarterback to do it was was Jim Kelly, who did it in the 90s. History shows that if you make a Super Bowl at any point in your career, unless you're a legend like Brady or Peyton, and we think Mahomes is going to go back at some point, the odds are stacked against you to go back to a Super Bowl after losing. The Rams were starting to look like the rest of those teams who just couldn't get back after they lost. Now they make the chance at quarterback. Does this put them over the top to potentially make their trip back to the Super Bowl?
I think they still need more. They lost their center, Austin Blythe, to the Chiefs in free agency. So they got to find a person to replace that. And that's going to be an important position for them because of the fact that you're bringing in Matthew Stafford, learning a new offense. You're going to want a guy that can go in there and operate and be on the same page early so they could have some success in the early portion of the season. Along with that, I feel like they have a need at receiver, and they could use like a big play receiver or a big body receiver to go with Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods. They have talent at receiver, but they're a lot of them have the same skill set. And then defensively, I think they could use a run and chase linebacker, another corner. They lose Troy Hill. So they're not just a Matthew Stafford away, in my opinion, from reaching the Super Bowl. I think they have to continue to surround Matthew Stafford with playmakers, improve the offensive line, and then really you have to get lucky. You have to have luck kind of fall in your way at the end of the season in those close games in order to reach Super Bowl.
Yeah, and luck is totally a fair factor in over the course of a 4.5-5 month long season. Now you add the extra
with the Saints when they win.
Right. Now you add the extra week. Exactly. And especially in terms of injuries, I remember the Vikings in the Case Keenum year. They were like weirdly healthy that year. They had no injuries, and that's why they won 13-14 games. And it's rare to see that teams who just don't get injured. So you need some luck, you need some depth, and yeah, Rams lost their starting safety. That they lost their starting slot corner, Troy Hill, John Johnson, who both went to the same team. I mean, what was with Cleveland just taking your entire secondary behind Jalen Ramsey? But let's talk about that. So Ramsey, obviously, probably the best corner in football, if not at worst top 3. One of the premier shutdown corners. Behind him, what does it look like right now in terms of just secondary?
Yeah, that's a fair question. I mean, Darius Williams on the other side had a great year, I think, for them. Finished with 4 interceptions and really showed the ability to go out and get the football. They bring back David Long Jr., who's probably going to be penciled in as the slot defender behind those 2 guys. And other than that, you're right. You need to continue to add depth there. They're pretty good at safety, but I think in terms of cornerback, along with those 3 guys, there's some practice squad guys that have played a little bit, but they need to add more depth through the draft, or even perhaps after the draft, look at to add a guy that has some experience in free agency.
So they brought back Leonard Floyd, huge piece to the defense. Seemed as if he'd thoroughly test the market. Some were surprised he didn't get franchise tagged, but he got 4 years, $64 million. How important was this for the Rams?
It was huge. I think he proved that he could play alongside Aaron Donald and be productive. Obviously, they lost Dante Fowler a year ago, who came in and had similar numbers. But I think with Leonard, what they liked is not only was he good coming off the edge, but he was good in run defense as well. Had 11 tackles for loss. Just think he was good overall fit for what they wanted to do defensively. Good in the locker room. Players liked him. He liked playing for Los Angeles. So I think it made a lot of sense for him to come back. You just wondered how they were going to figure it out financially because they were so up against the cap. But they made it work. They keep a playmaker on defense, and then now they can go on and kind of look to fill other needs through the draft.
Because he didn't really quite, obviously drafted very high with Chicago, feels like forever ago, but only 5 or 6 years ago. Didn't quite find his footing there, and they've drafted a plethora of linebackers since, and he just didn't work in Chicago. Came over to Los Angeles and turned into one of the best pass rushers in the league. He's playing less or more on the line, more pass rushing, and kind of Chicago had him in coverage a lot. But one of the more premier pass rushers in football, getting paid like it. What did you think of the payday?
It's a lot of cash, no doubt, but basically it's a 2-year deal with a $32 million guarantee. So you're looking for that production over the next 2 years. He has to go out and match it and earn that money over the next 2 seasons. He talked about wanting to get more sacks. I think he had 10.5 sacks last season. So he's not up there with the elite in terms of the sack numbers. That's something he wants to improve on. So I think for Leonard, it's going to be about going out there starting in 2021 and showing that he's deserving of that contract by making more plays.
So Michael Brockers gets traded to Detroit. They got about the worst draft pick possible, 2023 7th rounder. Just a huge salary dump. It just making room for something. But feels like Brockers has been on that defensive line forever. Does this open up a hole at that position next to Aaron Donald?
That's a great question, Jake, because Brockers was a guy that played inside next to Donald in obvious pass rushing situations and worked well as a tandem to help free Donald up. A lot of times taking on double teams and freeing up Donald to have singles so he could get to the quarterback. But it is an issue. I think we might see Sebastian Joseph Day fill that role initially on third down. I think when they play first down, you're probably going to see Ashawn, Sebastian Joseph Day, and Aaron Donald. And then when they go to that 4-man rush, you might see Sebastian in there. But the defensive line coach, Eric Henderson, also likes a lot of those young developmental guys they have in the roster that we haven't seen play a whole lot. Marquise Copeland, Eric Banks, Jonah Williams, Michael Hyde. They have some guys kind of, in the young developmental process that they think can come out and play and fill those roles. And they're going to have to do that because they don't have as much cap space to go out and sign guys. So they really have to rely on their positional coaches like Eric Henderson to develop young talent and then go out and sign more undrafted rookies and to continue to develop the back end of the roster.
So Josh Reynolds leaves Tennessee on pennies to the dollar, only like $1.4 million. In comes Deshaun Jackson, pretty much swapping some youth for some speed, I guess. Now, Reynolds was kind of the same player that Van Jefferson is. Could they have let him walk to potentially open up some more playing time for Van, who down the stretch performed really well?
Yeah, I think that was the plan all along. They weren't going to bring Josh back because they drafted Van Jefferson, who they have control over the next 3 years, who can be a deep threat. They believe. We'll see if that happens. He certainly showed it in training camp, matching up against Jalen Ramsey, and more times than not, he won those matchups. We just didn't see it in the regular season. So now he's going to get an opportunity to play. You mentioned Deshaun Jackson. He certainly gives them a guy that can be a vertical threat. And the vertical threat is not only making those plays, but it's also being a decoy in those passing routes, running the defense off, so you can now get Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods open underneath. And so I think you're going to see him used in that aspect, and also maybe in the screen game as well. I think he's a guy that can be for them, and McVay likes to run the screen game. However, I do believe they need a big body receiver, a guy that's 6'4", 220. That's different than what they have currently on the roster. When you saw Matthew Stafford at his best, who did he have? He had Megatron. He had a guy that was huge that he could throw jump balls to. He also had Kenny Galladay that served in that role the last couple of years he was there. So I expect them to go out and draft a big guy. Josh Reynolds was that kind of, but I think they need a more physical guy that they know can go out and win 50-50 balls. And I suspect that they're going to look to the draft to bring a guy in.
Yeah, so obviously Stafford at quarterback. So with the running backs, last year was kind of a three-headed monster, and then Akers towards the end of the year kind of showed why he was this second-round pick, and they took him pretty early according to where running backs were supposed to go last year. And he performed great down the stretch, but it was more of a three-headed monster throughout the year, a couple injuries, and then Akers is a stud. Malcolm Brown leaves. He's gone. So now it's just him or Akers and Henderson. Is 2021 going to be the Cam Akers show?
I fully expect that that's what's going to happen. I think we saw that kind of happen during the backstretch of last year, and him just kind of emerging as the guy that they were going to lean on. You saw it in the playoffs as well against Seattle and Green Bay. He has the skill set to do it. He has the size. He's good catching the ball in the backfield. Matthew Stafford likes to throw to his running back, so I think you'll see him emerge more as a pass catcher. Darrell Henderson's still going to get his run because he's a kind of a change of pace guy. But I think you saw with Darrell, he had trouble staying healthy if you used him too much. So it's probably better if you use him more in a complementary and limited role. And then I think you need to go out and add a big back to those three, a guy that like Malcolm Brown could maybe run goal line stuff or short yardage stuff, maybe do some third down situations as well. They also like Xavier Jones, who flashed a little bit in training camp last year. And then Ray Cowley is more of a gadget guy that can run, jet sweeps and also be used in the return game. So they have some depth at running back, but I wouldn't be surprised if they look to add some as a day 3 selection in this year's draft.
So they haven't had a first-round pick since Goff. At this rate, they won't be picking on night 1 until Goff retires, it seems like. How much pressure is on this team to win a Super Bowl with this roster? Because it feels like it's all or nothing at this point. When I'm back in LA, I see all the Rams hats, the city's buzzing around Rams football, it seems like, for the first time since they came back. And giving up 2 first-round picks for Ramsey, giving up 2 first-round picks for Matt Stafford. How much pressure is on this team to win a Super Bowl?
Might be aged by the time they make a first-round pick again, Jake. I mean, it seems like it's been forever. There's a lot of pressure, obviously. I mean, again, LA is kind of the city of champions, right? You have the Lakers who just won the NBA title, the Dodgers that just won the MLB title. And so now everybody's kind of looking at the Rams and going, hey, it's your turn. It's time for you guys to step up. So, yeah, there's a lot of anticipation. The Super Bowl is going to be in SoFi next year, so that's certainly part of the equation as well, being able to host Super Bowl like the Tampa Bay Bucks did this past year. But again, you have to go out and do it, right? I mean, you have to kind of go out and meet those expectations. And it's going to be a lot on how Matthew Stafford plays, not only in the early portion of the season, but the late portion of the season. How do they play in December? When they get to January, do they have home field advantage or do they have to go on the road? Because it's much easier to get to the Super Bowl if you have those games at home. And hopefully we have fans in attendance and they can have a true home field advantage at SoFi, which is an amazing place. Hopefully you get a chance soon to go check it out. So, yeah, immense amount of pressure, expectation because of everything that we've kind of just talked about. LA is a city of champions. You had a new quarterback that's supposed to be a lot better than the guy you moved on from. Sean McVay kind of wants to continue to build his legacy as one of the best coaches in the league. So we'll see if they can match.
The Rams are picking at 57, 88, 103, and 141. No first-round pick, just like last year, the year before, and so on. What holes do you think the roster has right now? We talked a little bit about the secondary, and maybe they can add some pieces there. And how do you think this team is looking to fill those holes with the draft picks they do have? Could they potentially find their left tackle of the future? We don't know how much longer Whitworth has. Could they go and take a premier corner? They don't have many picks in high rounds. What do you think that what do you think they're looking to do?
Yeah, I mean, I think you want to do best player available, but you also have to fill obvious needs for guys that could potentially be starters in your system on a team that has high expectations. Center is the most obvious need because you lost your guy to Kansas City. They have Brian Allen, who started a couple of years ago, but coming off of knee surgery. Coleman Shelton was his backup last year. Austin Corbett has played center in his past. You can move him from right guard to center, but I think you want to go out and get a guy that is going to be your long-term answer at the position. Your position coach that you just hired at the offensive line, Kevin Carberry, comes from Stanford. There's a guy from Stanford that's coming out and supposed to be a pretty good player, and Drew Dalman. That makes a lot of sense. A guy that he already knows a lot about, has some familiarity. His dad was an offensive line coach, played in the league. He's going to be technically sound. He should be able to come and hit the ground running. I think that makes a lot of sense. You're talking about that second round pick at 57 or third round if you want to wait. But I think they need to get a center in the first 2 picks to come in. Quinn Minera is a guy that a lot of people talk about, the Division III prospect out of Wisconsin, Whitewater, who has the big belly, that never seems to put his shirt down. Big personality that might make sense in Los Angeles. You get a big personality like that could attract people coming to the stadium. But for me, I think it makes sense to get center because it's most of their obvious need. You're right. Whitworth isn't getting any younger. He's going to be 40 this year. Still playing at a relatively high level, but you're concerned about the injury piece there. They have some guys that they like. Obviously, Noteboom was solid there for the most part second half of the season when Whitworth was hurt. Man, Ankrum is a guy that they drafted 7th round out of Clemson that looks good in training camp. So they have some pieces there that they're developing that could potentially be the left tackle of the future, but you can never have enough quality offensive linemen. So I think that would be the second place I would look in those top 3 picks. And then the third place, I think, is cornerback. We talked about it. There's not a lot of depth there. Certainly they have 2 guys that they like in Ramsey and Darius Williams, but adding another guy that can play at cornerback would make some sense.
Yeah, and look, they have one of the best rosters in the league. Teams who have great rosters don't necessarily need to pick in the first round. A lot of them do, though. But for the Rams, no first-round pick this year, no first-round pick next year, no first-round pick in 2023. But we expect them to be at the top of the division once again. We'll see what San Francisco does. It's a very, very, very good division. I think Seattle, I want to get your take on this because you covered Seattle. I think this is the year Seattle kind of blows up. Like, they still have Russell Wilson, so they'll be in the playoff hunt. But they have lost a lot of players, have not been bringing anyone premier or marquee into the building the last 2 years. I think this is the year they fall off a bit. Potentially finish last in the division.
There's a lot of chatter in Seattle and talking to people both that cover the team and inside the organization about what's going to happen with Russell Wilson after this year because of everything that was, went on publicly, in terms of him asking for, more offensive line and the possibility of moving him, Chicago's interest. So yeah, I think you're right. There could be some dissension there, which could cause some fracturing and that could lead to struggles on the field. My only thing is, I don't know if I'm ready to bet against Russell Wilson because he's been such a quality player. Even though the Rams seem to have, Seattle's number, they've done well against Seattle in the past couple of years. But Russell always figured out ways to win games in the fourth quarter. He's done that in his past. I expect him to do it, this upcoming year. But I do think you're correct in that there's a possibility that they could move on from Russell. And if that's the case, then yeah, Seattle would be rebuilding because they have to find a quarterback. Russell's one of the best quarterbacks in the league. So yeah, I do think there's something to that.
Yep, and if they were to trade Russell Wilson, their rebuild would be off to a good start with all those draft picks and probably a couple starters too. In return,
in Seattle. Unlike the Rams, Seattle likes more draft picks, so they get more at the apple to try to fill roles in the roster.
Exactly, great stuff, Eric. Thanks so much for coming on, man.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me, Jake. I enjoyed it.
Make sure to follow Eric on Twitter at Eric_D_Williams. Thank you guys for listening and watching this episode of 32 Teams in 32 Days, and I'll catch you in the next one.